1045theteam.com is happy to be back for the episode. What is this? Two. The second episode of the Fifth Round Podcast. We are here. Your hosts are Brian France, Ian Foard. I'm your producer extraordinaire, Brian the closer, Mariano. And, of course, we're going to get you set up for all of the upcoming stuff coming with UFC, Bellator, anything you want to talk about. We got it covered, guys, right?
Yeah, we got it covered.
Of course.
You got it covered?
Mm-hmm.
Are we sure? Of course we got it covered. All right, guys. Sure. Ian, what are we starting off with this week, buddy?
Brian wanted to start with Fabricio Verdum's recent troubles with the UFC and the Reebok deal.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Tell me about that. What's going on now?
If you haven't seen yet,
I have not.
Especially because we were talking about the Reebok deal last week.
Yep, last episode we talked about it.
Last episode. Fabricio Verdum decided to post a picture on his Instagram of the Reebok uniform without the Reebok logo and replaced with a Nike logo.
You dirty dog.
Now, even to make it worse,
guy.
He took a photo of himself in his walkout gear walking to the octagon at an actual UFC event. So the UFC has the copyright to the photo, pasted it on Instagram with the Reebok symbol replaced with the Nike swoosh, and put under it in Portuguese what roughly translates to "suck my balls."
Well,
yeah.
Well, how about that? That escalated quickly.
Now,
jeez.
Now this guy was the former UFC heavyweight champion. His last loss was to Stipe Miocic, and he was also a color commentator, fight analysis for the Latin America group. So he was gigantic, and I mean he's very popular in Brazil, Mexico, everywhere down south. And now he's suspended, can't do any commentating at all. That's the extra income that he just lost because of that.
So for him being an idiot and throwing a Nike symbol on top of a Reebok symbol, now he's losing all of the income he would normally have.
Yeah, besides
well, he can
fighting.
still fight. He can still fight, which is where he makes.
They're still going to let him fight after doing that?
Yeah, he's still fighting. They're not going to take him out. He's a
gun.
former champ. They still want him in there, but he did just lose all his supplemental income, and he got a real, that's a real hard punishment for a guy just for throwing a Nike symbol up. But the Reebok deal's real contentious right now. There's a lot of people who hate it as far as the media goes, and he just gave them all the fuel they could ever want. Well,
as a media member, this is all I have to say about that.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
I mean, are you kidding me? What kind of statement is he really trying to make here?
There's a real hard fight against Reebok because, one, the uniforms came out. Oh, if you weren't an MMA fan when they first came out, they put them up on the UFC website and on Reebok's website for sale, and there were mistakes everywhere. Guys with the wrong country colors. Gilbert Melendez's jersey was actually posted for a week and a half for sale as Giblert Melendez. Not Gilbert, but Giblert.
Nice.
I mean,
nice.
And then when they went to Ireland, they didn't even count Northern Ireland as part of Ireland.
Yeah. They put up a shirt for sale with Conor McGregor and a Conor McGregor shirt with the picture of the country and left off Northern Ireland.
Take that off.
Which, if you're from America, that's not a big deal. You don't really think about it. But for somebody from Ireland to leave Northern Ireland off, that's a political minefield that's been going on for 30 years, 40 years now, and they left it off, which blew up in their face out there. So
that's all these guys just make me laugh sometimes. Like, really? You're just trying to play all these mind games and want to do all this extra BS.
Well, remind you, I mean, the last fight he had before Verdum had before this was the championship bout where he was making $50,000 as the champion for Reebok.
Sure.
And then he goes from $50,000 to $5,000.
He's not going that far down.
Well, he's saying he's getting only paid $5,000 from Reebok when before the Reebok deal even started, he's like, I'm making a million, maybe more a fight from sponsors.
Which, as we talked about last week, as a champ or a former champ, a top 5 guy, he could make a lot of money with sponsorships. But he's taken the hit for all the guys on the bottom of the card. This is why I don't think you've seen massive blowback just from the big stars.
Just from the big guys.
Well, see, the UFC could say something like,
"Not up in here!"
With stuff like that. I mean, no, you ain't doing this crap. You know who the boss is. You're going to listen to us or else.
Yeah, and this hurts big time because he timed it. He knew what he was doing. The card this weekend, coming up on Saturday night, is in Mexico City, and it has a lot of what the UFC hopes is going to be their future stars in Latin America. They're trying to break into that market big time.
Yep.
And Verdum, though he's Brazilian, speaks fluent Spanish and is probably one of their two biggest stars down there and does a lot of work for them in the media in what would be their ESPN Sports Center style shows down there.
Yeah.
So he's got the limelight. Everybody's paying attention, and he decides to make his stand real quick. And by the way, this happened, 5-6 days ago, and he still has not removed the post from Instagram, which, he's just leaving it up there. They punished him, and he said, fine, but it's going to stay. I'm not taking it down, which they're obviously probably not very happy about either.
Yeah, but obviously it just seems like he doesn't care.
No.
He's making his point, and no matter what they do, he's going to make that point.
Yeah.
All right,
like
Brian.
I said, man, all you got to be here is.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
And we'll see. We'll see. Obviously, he doesn't care. The UFC is going to make their point, and then we'll find out as time goes on.
Yeah, and regardless whether they don't like the deal or not, the UFC signed a contract. They're locked into that.
Yep.
That's not going away for a couple of years.
Yep.
It's there. It is what it is. All right. So, speaking of Mexico City, we might as well talk about the card. Fight Night 98.
That's kind of what we're here for, right?
Coming up.
That's what we're kind of doing.
A little bit.
Okay.
Mexico City card. There's a few fights we can talk about with that card. Why don't you pick one we can start with, Brian?
Let's just start with the main event.
Yeah, go right to the top.
Oh,
I mean,
love
the big fight first.
All right, so your main event is your former champion, just lost the title, Rafael Dos Anjos at 155 versus Tony Ferguson. Tony Ferguson's been on a tear, Brian. Tony Ferguson has got the longest active winning streak in the UFC right now at 8-0.
Mm-hmm.
And if he makes it to 9-0, that'll be the longest win streak in that division ever.
Yeah, I mean, he's had 2 fight of the night performances and 2 performance of the nights, the last 4 fights. The guy is fantastic. I mean, from what Eddie Bravo says, he's got cardio for days. He's training in higher altitude because they are fighting in Mexico City. So it's, I think, 10,000 feet above sea level.
8,000 feet, and this is one of the first times the UFC finally got it right. Took a fight card to Mexico City and learned from all the mistakes they've made in the past with Mexico City, Denver, and other high-altitude areas. There's not a heavyweight or a light heavyweight on this card that you need to worry about. They took all the big guys out. Every time they've gone to a place like this, there was the fiasco in Denver a couple of years ago where Mark Hunt was on the main card in Denver. Brendan Schaub was on the main card in Denver. It was all heavyweights, and it was terrible.
I mean, but at the same time, Fabricio Verdum did win the belt in Mexico City in higher altitude against the guy who had the best cardio ever in the heavyweight division in Cain Velasquez.
Again, though, that caused a lot of contention. You had a guy whose entire fight game in Cain Velasquez was based on the fact that he could go 100 miles an hour for 25 minutes. Nobody could keep the same pace. And for the first time in his entire career, he had issues with his cardio because you were at 8,000 feet above sea level. You took the guy to the one place he might be weak, which, depending on how you want to look at it, if you want to say you should be able to fight anywhere, okay, you should be able to fight anywhere. But if you're a fan of Velasquez or of heavyweights in general, and you want to say, look, this guy wins 99.9% of the time, it shouldn't matter where the fight takes place. He should be able to win in a cage anywhere, and you took him to the one spot that's just not fair. Maybe he wins that belt.
So let me just ask, is this really, and obviously to make a sports analogy to it, obviously when teams go to Denver and play the Broncos, it's quite a difference because of the altitude. Is it really that big a difference even when you're in the octagon?
Yeah.
It's huge
Is
difference. Yeah, most guys will, like Fabricio Verdum trained for, like, he was there for 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
Bought a house complex, everything, trained there. Cain Velasquez only did a few weeks.
Okay.
And he's like, I should have trained longer there.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about a guy whose career was defined by his cardio. He was the guy who you couldn't stop. He was the Energizer Bunny. He just kept running and running and running. And you'd get tired 8 minutes in because of the pace he forced you to fight at, and he could keep going. Now he gets in here, and for the first time ever, we saw him tired, like real tired. And it's not like football where there's a break between plays and you can rest.
Sure.
You can catch your breath. Even in baseball, they have to treat baseballs different in Colorado than they do in other parks.
Oh, sure. The
Otherwise,
balls fly out of there. Absolutely.
Yeah. So MMA is a sport where you've got to sit there for 5 straight minutes and you can't take a break. And when you do get a break, it's 30 seconds and you're right back in.
Yeah.
So the ability to recover is a big deal. And for anybody who's never been hit in the face, it's not like, being exhausted makes it worse, but it's easier to deal with being hit. It's easier to recover from being rattled when your cardio is good. So
sure. Yeah, that makes sense.
When you're exhausted, you get hit in the head, the cobwebs don't leave. If you're fresh, you get hit in the head, you can shake that off, especially if you're trained to take a punch. And little tiny nuances, we're getting real technical now, but one of the best ways to take a punch is not to stand with your chin there and get hit. It's to roll with it. Just little movements of the muscles in your neck, shift in your head as you get hit, can alleviate a ton of the power of the shot being thrown at you. When you get tired, you don't do it. You just don't respond. And then you get knocked out.
Yep, and that's why Tony El Kukui Ferguson is actually training in Big Bay right now. Well, probably not right now. It's a week out, so he's probably in Mexico City by now for media and everything. And weigh-ins are tomorrow for us. So
Friday.
November 4th, Friday, November 4th. The fight's Saturday, November 5th. The main card starts at 10 o'clock.
I believe it's 10 o'clock. Yeah. Now
on Fox Sports 1.
So,
yep.
I'm looking on UFC.com right now, and Ferguson, am I reading this right? His KO percentage is 50%?
He is...
In 25 fights?
He's got a crazy finishing percentage. This guy's got a 72% finish rate. Which
that is nuts.
That's the best finish rate in the UFC's top 10. 72% of the fights he gets in don't make it to the judges. That's far and away the best one. He's got 9 submission wins, 9 KO wins.
Yeah.
That's 18 finishes in a 26-fight career?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, this will be his 26th fight.
Mm-hmm.
Now, he is fighting an absolute animal, strong beast of Rafael Dos Anjos.
Yeah, he's ripped.
Who has power himself. Ooh. I mean, he knocked out Ben Henderson when no one thought he could get knocked out. So
this fight is going to be crazy. You have probably the 2 guys with the highest pace and the best motors in the whole division. You have Rafael Dos Anjos, whose entire game plan and his entire strategy every fight is built on pressure, 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 and pace. He works faster than anyone else. He dominated Donald Cerrone because he just got moving. But if he can't get that pace going, you saw what happened with Eddie Alvarez. Eddie Alvarez stopped him from pushing the pace he wanted to, and he lost the belt.
Mm-hmm.
All right,
Tony
guys.
Ferguson, the opponent, is the next guy in line for pace, so it should be great.
All right, since I'm a degenerate gambler, as you know, when you listen to the Paddock Pass and I give you all your horse racing tips. All right, this is what I want to hear right now.
Show me the money!
Okay, as you look on the fighter odds right now, Dos Anjos is a -140 favorite, and obviously you guys are talking about, I want you guys give me a winner, and then I want to know over under because it's two. Is this a 5-round fight?
Yes.
Okay, so two and a half. We'll say. Are we going? Take your picks. I want over under the 2.5 rounds. Okay, and then I want a winner between Dos Anjos and Ferguson. You're getting -140 for Dos Anjos, +120 for Ferguson.
For me, I'm going to definitely say over. I
Okay.
don't see this ending quick.
No, I mean, both of them have very solid chins. I mean, Dos Anjos did get cracked by Eddie Alvarez in his last fight, but it was a good shot, a perfect right on the chin kind of shot.
Yeah.
So it should last over the 2.5.
Yeah.
But it might end before that. But we're definitely
Be pretty close. So
It could be.
right in that 3rd round area, you think it could be?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would go over.
All right.
I mean, this is a real tough fight to pick because Tony Ferguson is on an 8-fight win streak. I mean, that is the longest out of anybody in the UFC right now. But if you look at that 8-fight win streak, there's nobody in the top 10 there. There's nobody that was top 10 at the time or is top 10 now. He hasn't taken out any of the real big dogs. This is the first real test, and he's going up against the former champ who just lost. So it's a tough one to pick. Tony Ferguson finishes everybody. But Dos Anjos doesn't get finished, and the guy's something like 8-1 or 8-2 in his last 10, and the losses are to Khabib Nurmagomedov, who is still undefeated but can't seem to stay healthy and get his title shot.
Yeah, he should have had his title shot a long time ago, but he got injured too much.
If not for Conor McGregor, he probably does have his title shot.
Yeah.
But Conor steps up and says, I want that belt. And the UFC says, yeah, okay, he gets it. So that, and then he lost the belt. And those are his only 2 losses. He's taken out top 10 guys left and right. If you look at Rafael Dos Anjos' record, Donald Cerrone, Anthony Pettis, Ben Henderson, they're all top 10 when he fights them. Nate Diaz, close. And 2 of those, he beat Donald Cerrone twice in that time span in his last 10. Whereas Tony Ferguson, there's nobody on that list. His best win is probably Edson Barboza or Josh Thompson. Josh Thompson couldn't hack it in the UFC. Now he's in Bellator. And Edson Barboza is on a fringe top 10, maybe. Definitely top 15, but probably not top 10.
Well, the way Edson Barboza has been fighting since that fight, he's looked much better. I think he's training with Mark Henry now down in New Jersey, and his game has changed a lot. But definitely when Tony fought him, it was a little bit of a different Edson Barboza.
The other thing, though, you got to factor in is Dos Anjos has a lot of injuries recently. He came on, for anybody who hasn't been watching for too long, he's been around for a long time.
Very long time. And
nobody other than Michael Bisping had as many fights as he had before he got to a title shot and got a title. He was a middle of the pack guy. Nobody ever thought he would get close to a belt for a long time. He'd had 10 fights in the UFC, and people were looking at him going, okay, he'll be around a while, but he's never going to win a belt. He won a belt 18 fights in. 18 fights into a UFC career is insane to finally get a belt.
Oh, yeah.
He got it because he changed his game plan. He started working with Rafael Cordero, and he's working with, I forget the gentleman's name, but he's working with a guy who's a Todd Marinovich disciple and going through all the Marinovich workouts. That got him in shape like he'd never been before, but now we've seen a string of injuries following that. He broke his foot, lost the McGregor fight. He's lost a couple of other fights in the meantime because he's not lost the fight, but lost the ability to get to the fight. He didn't make it. They had to scrap it, and that ended up fighting Nate Diaz. This is what happens when you overwork your body. I think Dos Anjos might be on a downswing starting sometime soon because he's overworking himself.
All right, so shall we pick a winner?
Who you got?
It's a tough one, but I got to take Dos Anjos.
I might go the other way and go Tony Ferguson.
I think Tony Ferguson can win it, and I think that betting line's pretty accurate because it's real close, but Tony Ferguson hasn't beaten anybody yet.
If Tony's able to keep the distance away, if he's able to keep Rafael Dos Anjos from pressuring him too much, I think he'll be able to pick him apart from the outside and take the fight.
I 100% agree with that. Dos Anjos, if he can't get you to the fence, cannot win. His entire game plan is built on pressure, pace, and push you back to the fence. If he gets you to the fence, he can take you down. If he can take you down, he can hurt you. And if he can stand you against the fence, even if he can't get you down, he can hurt you. But if you leave him in space, he gets beat up. So Ferguson's got to try and stop him. Now, Tony's been a predominant striker in his whole UFC career, but he was a very good wrestler in college.
Yeah, I mean, on The Ultimate Fighter, he was known for his wrestling, and he was training with Brock Lesnar. So,
absolutely. I don't know if Ferguson's going to be able to take his foot off the gas. He's so aggressive. I think he's going to try and come out at Dos Anjos, and it's going to work to his disadvantage. If he doesn't circle and take the right angles, he comes straight in, he's going to get pushed straight back. And that's going to put him on the fence, and then he's going to get crushed. I honestly see this going all 5 rounds. I just think Dos Anjos has got enough. It's too close.
I like it. 1045theteam.com. It's the Fifth Round Podcast. Our host, Brian France, Ian Foard. I'm your producer extraordinaire, Brian the closer, Mariano. Guys, we have a lot of things coming up UFC, man. You know, Albany's coming up in December, UFC 205. We got to get the guys going. What's up next, Ian?
Do you want to talk about any other fights from that card?
We got the Ricardo Lamas, Charles Oliveira
and what do we
fight.
got? This card looks awesome this week. Look at this.
I mean, it's a fantastic main card.
Absolutely. For the undercard is a little weak. It's not exactly what you want.
Like we said last week, it's a typical fight night card.
But there are some real good fights on the main card. Charles Oliveira, Ricardo Lamas, I think is a great fight. I can't wait to watch that one. That is, like as we were talking earlier, I think that's 2 broken featherweights, 2 guys whose styles just aren't great, guys who have severe weaknesses, but somehow still manage to win fights, somehow still manage to win top 10 fights. Charles Oliveira has got all the physical gifts you could ever want. He is an explosive striker. He is even more explosive in scrambles, and his submissions are top notch. But he's what I would call a glass cannon. He's a glass cannon. He's all offense, and his defense is terrible. He can't take a punch. He can't take a shot to the ribs. We've seen both of those shots that weren't that hard put him out of fights. And he mentally breaks if you push the pressure. He's got a bully mentality. He wants to bully you and be in charge. And if he can't be in charge, it doesn't work for him.
Yeah, and then you got Ricardo Lamas on the other hand, who's about average athletic ability, maybe has good skills, maybe not in the top 10 of skills,
Nothing
but
matters.
he's mentally strong. He's a bully. He has a very strong mindset, wants to just go in there, bully you around, try to push the pace.
He's the exact opposite.
The exact opposite.
Whereas Oliveira is all physical gifts and mentally he folds. He quits. I hate to call him a quitter, but if you watch his fights, he does.
That might not be not a smart thing to do.
If not to his
ripped.
face.
Well,
Sure as heck would.
No.
If you
Yeah,
watch
like-
him in fights, when he gets hit, when things don't go his way, he quits. He just asks out. He's gone down from shots that should not have put anybody out.
Well, look
Wouldn't
at his
have put a
last
guy
loss
out.
against Anthony Pettis. I mean, he started off strong, and then when things started going not his way, he just faltered.
Yeah, but Lamas, on the other hand, is a guy that his striking is good. His wrestling's okay. His submissions are good enough, but nothing should put him in the top 10 as far as his athletic ability or his skills. But when he sees the smallest opening, I've never seen anybody jump on an opening and just go killer instinct faster and more successful than he has. It's crazy. You look at a guy, his striking's okay, and then the moment somebody makes a mistake and there's an opening, he pounces. He almost beat Jose Aldo. He got beat up for 4 rounds straight against Jose Aldo for the title a couple of years ago. And in the 5th round, when he had an opportunity, he put Aldo down and put him in more danger than anybody but Conor McGregor ever has.
Yeah, or look at his last fight against Max Holloway. He was losing that fight. They get to the last round, the last 2 or 3 minutes, and those two are standing in the middle of the cage, swinging for the fences at each other.
Absolutely. That's going to be a great fight. I just don't see... And that betting line, I've seen it a couple of different ways. The last time I checked it, it was an almost even line at -110, I think it was.
It's exactly that. They're even. There's no favor right now. -110 both ways.
Bleacher Report had put it out at somewhere around 9 o'clock tonight. A different line. I don't know if it's adjusted or if somebody's just got
Could
the
be.
line wrong.
It could be something that changes tomorrow.
They
You know
had
what I mean?
Lamas as an underdog, and if that's the case tomorrow, if you see that fight Friday or Saturday night, and you see that line, and Lamas is still the underdog, bet that. Absolutely bet that. I think he's got that in the bag. I don't think there's any question. Just he's going to put Oliveira in a bad spot eventually, and if you can do that, you win.
No, and I definitely agree with you. He's got the skill set to keep him in the fight, and then once he sees Charles break, he's going to pounce.
Absolutely. All right, I think the last fight we'll talk about on that card is the Diego Sanchez-Marcin Held fight, just because it's got some interesting things going on with just the storyline for that fight.
Oh, yeah.
Marcin Held, this is going to be his UFC debut. He is a longtime Bellator fighter. He had 14 fights in Bellator, only 3 losses, one of which was early on in his career to Dave Jansen. He's since avenged that loss in his very last fight with Bellator. And the other 2 are the Bellator champions, Michael Chandler and Will Brooks. So he's not lost to anybody that he should have beaten. He's managed to come out and win a ton of fights, and he's got a real unique style. He's all about leg locks, which you generally don't see. Great submission fighter, and he's it almost feels like Diego Sanchez is being walked out as the sacrificial lamb for this fight.
Yeah, but at the same time, Diego Sanchez he's always in the fight. He always makes it a dog fight. He wants to stand and bang with you. He can take it to the ground if he really needs to.
And we all know that he is the king of taking split decisions that he should never have any right to get. The judges seem to always fall in his favor, even when you're looking at it going, really?
It's because of how many punches he throws at once.
I mean, do you watch the Ross Pearson Diego Sanchez fight? I think we watched it together.
Of course.
Ross Pearson won that fight.
Yeah, he did.
14 out of 14 media cards. You know, a lot of media members for MMA websites do their own scorecards. 14 out of 14 that MMADecisions.com collected had Ross Pearson winning handily, 3 rounds to none. And he lost that fight because the judges took Sanchez. I don't get it. Sanchez has been around for a long time. He won the original season of The Ultimate Fighter way back when. He's had 24 fights in the UFC. But he's got to be at the end of his rope now.
I mean, he's been at the end of his rope for a little while now, but
Yeah, yes.
I mean, he's been going through three different weight classes: welterweight, lightweight, and featherweight. Finally, decided to stay back at lightweight because the featherweight was too much. He actually lost to Ricardo Lamas in his last fight at featherweight. So,
I've never been able to understand why he fights the way he does now. When he was successful at 170 pounds and at 155, when he was successful on The Ultimate Fighter, he was a wrestler first with explosive grappling, and he could strike if he had to.
And he can always take a beating.
Oh, absolutely. But he wanted you on your back, and then he wanted to work his submission game, which is actually really good, and his ground and pound was excellent. And in the last 3 years, all he wants to do is stand in the center of the cage and throw punches like he's on a schoolyard. And there's not even any technique to the punches. He's just winging them.
He's just throwing left and right hooks like crazy.
I have better technical skill than Diego Sanchez in his last few fights, and
Whoa.
I don't have all that much technical skill.
Whoa.
Well, that's Diego
Ian,
Sanchez's game plan. I mean, he wants to now bring it into a dogfight, so your skill set
But do you feel
is
like
outnumbered.
Do you feel like he abandoned? Because for me, I personally feel like he just abandoned the drive to win. He doesn't care if he wins anymore. He just wants those performance checks.
I mean, $50,000 is a lot of money for someone.
It feels like that's what he's doing. He's just trying to go out.
It's a lot
and
of
get
money
check.
for everybody in the room,
Oh,
in my opinion. I mean,
Yeah.
it might not be for you guys, but then I feel that good for you guys, I guess. But jeez.
It feels like he's trying to win a performance bonus every time. He just wants to get it fight of the night. I want to entertain the fans. Well, entertaining the fans is great, but you still kind of need to win.
Well, I mean, he's still got a name. He's a legend in the UFC. I mean, he doesn't really need to win anymore.
But this is the first time I feel like they've set him up where they're just going to use his name. I mean, this happens a lot. We see this as fans all the time. When a guy hits the end of his rope and the UFC now knows it, they put him up against an up-and-coming guy or a prospect or somebody that needs a good win because they want to use his name value to boost whoever he's going to fight. They never did that with Diego. He took on other veterans. And taking on another veteran, they're obviously not trying to use your name. They're trying to make a good fight.
Mm-hmm.
When he's fighting Ross Pearson, when he's fighting Ricardo Lamas, those are guys with well over 10 fights each in the UFC, and it's a good fight. Now he's fighting a guy making a debut because there's nothing left for him, I guess.
Yeah, well, he's fought almost everyone in the lightweight division.
But you
So-
could throw him up against another. Oh, you could throw him up against a Jim Miller or, God, anybody, and give him a rematch with Joe Lauzon. Anything.
That'd be actually a really good fight.
But apparently, the way I see it is the UFC's matchmakers are saying, nope, it's time for him to fight some up-and-coming guys and sink or swim.
Mm-hmm.
And if he sinks, oh, well, we got what we needed out of him. It's been 25 fights. And that guy gets a boost. And if he wins, oh, great. Well, Diego won. But no more veterans. No more fights that we're just going to try and keep you here. We're going to give you a chance to keep your job or lose your job pretty much every time from here on out.
Yeah.
So what we're saying is, when we look at the line here, Ian, you have Sanchez is plus 220 against 260 for Marcin. Now that, I mean, minus 260 is a lot in my opinion, but is he this good? Is this just something I say, okay, minus 250 or 260, I have to take it, or
Marcin Held is good. Whether he's that good, we don't know because he came over from Bellator.
Sure.
And we've seen some guys come over from Bellator and have a lot of success. We've seen other guys just lose a couple in a row and get thrown out. I mean, a guy coming in from another organization, you never know. He could have had all that success because he was that good, or he could have just looked good against lesser competition.
Mhm.
An 11-3 record in Bellator means he did something right, but
he's not bad.
he didn't.
Clearly.
He didn't beat the two best guys he fought. He got beat pretty handily by both of the guys he fought that were pretty good. So this to me is Diego might beat him, and if Diego beats him, an Ultimate Fighter, classic UFC guy just spanked a Bellator guy who had a great record in Bellator. The UFC loves it. And if he beats Diego, well, no, you didn't lose anything. You lost Diego Sanchez, who's been miles away from a title shot for about 7 or 8 years.
Yeah, I mean, with Diego Sanchez, you really never know what you're going to get anymore. I mean, it's either going to be an incredibly entertaining fight where both fighters will meet in the middle and just brawl, or the other fighter is going to realize Diego Sanchez and just use a game plan
Yeah.
against Diego Sanchez that he won't be able to match.
Yeah, I would say
so
you
you're
know
trying
what
to Bill
you're
Belichick it a little.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to take away your best asset, and you're not going to be able to beat me.
That's what you should do in every MMA fight if you're game planning right. When Diego fights, to Brian's point, you don't know what you're going to get out of the fight, but
Sure.
you know what you're going to get out of Diego,
Yep.
which is, I didn't game plan, and I'm not really going to try and use any skill. I'm going to wade into your punches, eat them on the chin, and try and throw them back at you, and that's pretty much it. It looks like a barroom brawl because Diego's just trying to walk in and throw a ton of stuff. He throws everything with the kitchen sink at you, but none of it's any skill. He's not throwing knees, kicks. He's just wandering into punches and throwing punches.
But it should be a very exciting fight. I mean, if Marcin
absolutely.
Held doesn't play into Diego Sanchez's game, he should be able to win it. But Diego Sanchez does have a knack of making almost every fight into that brawl.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what do you think for a pick? Do you think, I mean, Diego still has really good submission defense. It's not like he forgot. And Marcin Held has always been a leg lock, maybe a choke. He's not going to knock you out. So how do you think that fight ends?
I can't pick that fight because I don't know.
Oh, no. You're not bailing on me right now, France.
I don't
not
know.
doing it.
I don't know that much.
Not on the
about-
5th round podcast. Okay, we do not do that.
That's the championship round, the 5th round.
That's right.
Well, you want
We
me to
show
go
up
first?
in the 5th round.
I don't know too much about Marcin Held. All I know is Diego Sanchez is just
He looks like the
a
Polish
crazy
penetrator.
fighter.
Look at this guy.
He's a crazy
oh my
fighter.
Lord.
He's a shell of his former self, though.
He really is. If Marcin Held has the promise that he should coming into the UFC, I'm gonna go with him over Diego Sanchez by decision.
I'm going to go the opposite way because I'm never going to pick Diego Sanchez to lose by decision because I've seen the judges hand it to him too many times. And I don't think Held can submit him. I think Diego will survive the leg locks because he's still really good at jiu-jitsu. He doesn't use it, but maybe he'll remember in the middle of the fight if he gets hit enough times that he has to defend something. I think it's going to go to decision. I think Held should win. And I think when the fight ends, you're going to think Held won. And I think the judges are going to rob him because it's Diego. I'm just going to go out on a limb and say Diego by absolute robbery.
Man,
Actually,
taking
the
shots.
Wasn't it Diego Sanchez versus Ross Pearson in Mexico City?
Oh, God, I'd have to look it up. Hang on.
I believe it was.
Oh, God. I don't remember. I remember that fight vividly. I can't remember where the heck it happened. That was not.
No.
That was in Albuquerque. Now it makes sense.
Oh,
It was in
that's-
Diego's hometown. Now it makes
Diego's
sense.
hometown.
Oh, my goodness. 1045theteam.com. It's the 5th round podcast with your host, Ian Foard, Brian France. I'm your producer extraordinaire, Brian, the closer, Mariano. So, guys, I kind of have to gloat a little bit here before we move on because, of course, we tape the shows on Thursdays, and I came into work on Friday, right? And I'm lucky enough to send you guys a text saying, hey, guys, guess who's in studio? Oh, it's Gian Vellante. Oh, it's Derek Lewis. These guys are massive.
You see the
Are
screen
you
on this phone?
joking?
You see the screen on this phone? It's broken because I threw the phone when you said that.
Dude, these guys are massive.
Oh, they're huge.
Like, Levac's sitting next to him, and like, we're joking, like, oh, yeah, if you guys want to have a fight with anyone here, take it Levac. Levac's like, nah, man, I'm good. Like, I like my life. It's okay.
Oh, they're big boys, and that's not even as big as they get.
Like, are you joking?
You didn't see Steph in the skyscraper Struve, all 6'11" of him walking in the door.
Dude, like, that just made me, like, psyched to go to the UFC Fight Night.
Oh,
like,
my
these
God.
guys are, like, they are big boys.
Mm-hmm. And I loved listening to that and hearing Derek Lewis talk about eating beer and drinking beer
Dude,
and chicken
it was
wings.
awesome.
I'm sitting there going,
Awesome.
oh, God, he's going to lose.
No, dude, it's
Beer
like
and chicken wings.
that's what he wants, man. Carbo loaded. Keep it going. That was one of those. If you guys didn't get to hear that interview, go to 1045theteam.com. It was last Friday that they were in studio. Always a good time. I had to rub it in your guys' faces a little bit, though, because I know I'm not the biggest UFC guy on this podcast, and you two are the experts. And, yeah, I got to meet them.
And I'm
so,
sitting at home on my
boom.
couch having Brian poke fun at me because you got to meet him.
Yep,
Yeah.
sent you those pics.
My day
What?
job is only about 10 minutes away from this studio. I almost drove here on my lunch.
You literally should have. Like,
I should've.
next time this happens, obviously it's going to happen a lot more with us getting UFC in Albany. So, like I said, if this happens, man, you guys get a hold of me and we'll hook you up. But, like, I sat there and looked at this. After I saw these guys, I'm like, all right, I got to study this a little bit. And I was like, both these fights look really good. I don't want to get you guys off topic, but I just looked at these real quick. Like, Gian Vellante's facing Patrick Cummins. I know we talked about this a little bit last week, but I feel like this kid, I've never seen, obviously, Patrick Cummins, up close and personal. but Gian Vellante looks like one of those guys that if I ever have an issue, I'm like, yeah, dude, go take care of it. He's going to absolutely beat your ass.
He's like a lot of guys at light heavyweight that he talked about it here. He has to cut weight. He has to watch what he eats. He walks around at some points at what he said, 240 pounds.
Yeah.
So he fought heavyweight for the first portion of his career for quite a few fights, somewhere around a dozen fights. He fought heavyweight and then realized in order to make it on the big stage, he's got to fight guys his own size. He's 6'2", and he's fighting 205 pounds because that's the reality of MMA. You have to be in prime, 100% prime shape unless you are Derek Lewis big.
Bro, he didn't look 205 pounds.
No. Derek Lewis is one of those guys who fights heavyweight.
Derek Lewis definitely does not look that. That guy is massive.
He will walk in at 265. Derek Lewis is one of those guys that fights heavyweight because he doesn't want to cut weight. He could probably Roy Nelson. Roy Nelson could fight 185. Roy Nelson could fight at 185 pounds at middleweight.
He wants beer and chicken. Why the heck does he want to fight anything less than heavyweight?
Roy Nelson eats nothing but McDonald's and Burger King all day and ends up fighting at 265 when he could probably fight middleweight.
Hey, I mean, when you're that heavy and you have the power to knock out those heavy dudes, I wouldn't change it either.
Crazy.
Like they walked in and like as soon as Levac said it was like, nope,
Not up in here!
It wasn't gonna happen. Unbelievable. And the worst part is then when you talk to him, you think they're like these big, they're the nicest guys in the world.
Oh my God, yeah.
And all like we joked about going to have a beer. He's like, yeah, dude, when I'm done trading, and we tell Lewis, like, what do you mean when like you just said you have beer and chicken wings? Like that's what we're going to do. Come on, dude, we'll go to Hooters right now. Let's go. But I just want to throw that in your face, though. Just next time when there's UFC fighters in the studio, I'll let you guys know. Little
definitely.
Okay.
Thanks, bud.
You're welcome.
Thanks for all the notice.
I'm just here so I don't get fined. All right, what's up next, Ian?
Brian, you want to go ahead with the next topic you were talking about?
Yeah, let's go off onto Bellator 163. We got at least one big fight on that card. It's tomorrow, Friday, November 4th. On Spike TV.
There would have been two fights, but apparently we're not professional and we can't make weight for fights in Bellator. So we had
6 pounds.
Shake that off.
Yeah, there was There's a women's fight that was supposed to go down tomorrow. Marlo Conan, who is getting up there in years, but still one of the legends at 145. If you were to compile a list of the best fighters there, she'd be top 3 all time. And it's a weak weight class. There's nobody in it, but she's one of the few names. Her fight had to get canceled because the girl they signed to fight her, Talita Nogueira, decided that 151 pounds was the weight class, not 145. So day before the fight, she weighs in 6 pounds over, and Marlo Conan said, nah, not in this house. I'm not fighting her.
Can't do it.
You like, really? No. What are you doing?
You're contracted to make a certain weight. That is the weight class you signed to fight in. You show up overweight, get out of here.
Mm-hmm.
That if she was a UFC fighter, she'd probably be out of a job right now.
Yeah, and not to mention, I mean, for the lighter weight classes, and especially for women, 6 pounds is a lot of weight.
That's a lot of weight.
Most guys, they'll be like, all right, let's fight. Let's do it anyway. But for most women fighters, and at 145 pounds, that's a lot of weight.
Well, sure. I mean, 6 pounds when you're both 270 is not that big a deal, but 6 pounds when you're half that weight is definitely an advantage.
And Marlo Conan was not going to do it because in her last fight at the last Bellator card she fought Alex Dufresne, and she decided, I'll fight her anyways when Alex came in 4 pounds over. And she said, no, I need the money. We're going to do this fight. I don't care if she's 4 pounds over. Well, those 4 pounds made a big difference because she got thrown around like a rag doll by a bigger girl, and she lost. And she's just not going to take the same chance twice.
Yeah, it's a smart move on her part.
But the fight that will happen, Brian.
Liam McGeary versus Mr. Wonderful Phil Davis.
Now, this one is one of the few Bellator fights I'll watch.
This is going to be an exciting fight.
I'm going to watch this, without a doubt. I can't miss it.
It's got a huge implication. I can't even say
I'm sorry.
What implications?
We got you. We got you.
For Bellator and the light heavyweight division, especially because it's the championship fight. It's a 5-rounder with Liam McGeary being the champ, but Phil Davis coming over from UFC, won 3 in a row, 2 of them being in their light heavyweight tournament.
This is a real big one.
And he really deserves to be a champ, at least somewhere.
Absolutely. I mean, McGeary at this point is untested. He's 34 years old. He's fresh. He's young in the game. He's only 11-0. He hasn't been around a while. So he doesn't have a ton of tear on his body. Not a ton of wear and tear on him, but he's 34. So it's now or never. He's got 3-4 good years in him. I mean, the bigger they are, the longer they last generally in this sport. But 205, I can't see him fighting at a high level past 37, 38 years old, but he's fought nobody who's even close to a top 25 guy in the world in the last. Well, maybe Emmanuel Newton. Maybe.
Emmanuel Newton.
But Tito Ortiz is the biggest name on his record, and Tito Ortiz is about 10 years past his prime. So this is the first real big test. Phil Davis left the UFC ranked top 5.
Yeah, I mean, Phil Davis beat a lot of big names in the UFC. He beat Glover Teixeira. He beat Lyoto Machida. He beat Alexander Gustafsson. Granted, that was when Alexander Gustafsson just got into the UFC.
Yeah. And the UFC wasn't all that worried about losing him because he wasn't the most exciting guy in the world.
He wasn't that big draw. I mean, he had somewhat of a name, but he wasn't going to beat the top guys.
No, he faltered when he fought the best of the best, which isn't a terrible thing. Being a top 5, top 10 guy for your whole career makes you a lot of money. But he obviously wanted a belt and didn't feel like he got the respect. Yeah, we hear that a lot. The UFC didn't show me any respect. Well, you weren't top 5. But this is big. I mean, what do you think? Does McGeary? I mean, Geary's a big guy. He's 6'6". He's got a lot of reach. I mean, he's a huge guy. His wingspan is well over 80 inches. That's crazy. He looks like a basketball player out there, except he's jacked.
Yeah, I mean, he's a big guy.
And Phil Davis looks like the Black Superman. I mean, Mr. Wonderful is huge.
His back is like a cape in its own.
He's got thighs bigger around than my waist, and his wrestling chops are legit. The only guy we've seen absolutely stop his wrestling and throw him around is Rumble Johnson, and Anthony Rumble Johnson is huge.
Yeah, he literally tossed Phil Davis across the
I would trust if I left my keys under my car, Anthony Rumble Johnson could pick it up for me so I can get my keys. I mean, he's huge. But I don't know. Where do you think that fight goes?
If it's standing, Phil Davis's striking isn't that good. I mean, it's
getting there. It's coming along.
But compared to Liam McGeary, I mean, it may not be there.
No.
But his wrestling is what makes Phil Davis special.
Yeah, I mean, on the feet, he's got a basic combination of, he's got a good jab. It's not great. He leaves it out there a little bit too long, but he's got a good jab. He throws a nice 1-2 combo, which is a left jab and a right hand straight behind it. And he's got good leg kicks. I'd say he's got better than average leg kicks.
Yeah, I'd agree with you.
But that's it. But that's all he's got. McGeary, on the other hand, throws a lot of stuff. He's well-versed in Muay Thai, and he'll mix it up. Also, his jiu-jitsu is really good, so if they do hit the mat, there's always that threat of a submission. But Mr. Wonderful, on the other hand, he likes his arm locks. So if he leaves himself exposed while trying for something, Phil Davis will take it and rip it off.
Yeah. I mean,
I don't even know where to... I think Phil Davis is going to take it.
I agree with you. I mean, Phil Davis has definitely better, maybe not a better record with 3 losses, but they were against really, really tough guys.
He's got a much better resume. Yeah.
Oh, way better resume.
And I think 205 is one of those weight classes where Bellator just can't compare. They have some very competitive divisions where I think some of their guys can come into the UFC and compete. 155, 145, maybe even 170, 185, 205, 265. The larger the weight class gets, the harder it is to find quality guys, and I think the UFC's got 95% of them. I don't think Liam McGeary is a quality top 10 UFC guy. I don't think he's going to be anywhere near there. I think Phil Davis is going to show that and expose him, but I could be wrong.
I mean, they are calling Liam McGeary the Bellator John Jones.
Yeah, he's the British John Jones.
But
I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah, he really has been untested. This is going to be his biggest test. It's going to be free tomorrow on Spike.
And don't forget, Tito Ortiz took McGeary down and landed some good ground and pound on him. And Tito Ortiz has got 12 neck surgeries and an excuse for every loss, but he's old, and he took McGeary down and hurt him before he got submitted.
Yeah, I mean, he did submit him in the first round, though. So.
Oh, absolutely, but he suffered the takedown, and if Tito can get you on your back and start punching you in the head, what do you think Phil Davis is going to do?
He's going to get you down, mount you, and probably try to go for a submission.
And if he does get him down, he's probably not going to be as reckless as Tito.
Nope.
So I could easily see a 25-minute snooze fest. I mean, unfortunately, I don't mean to talk bad about Phil Davis, but I could see him taking him down and laying on him, doing just enough to keep it on the ground for 25 minutes and walking away with a decision. But that has massive implications for Bellator if that happens.
Yeah, I really hope Phil Davis goes in there and is able to finish him quick, because he definitely needs to have a finish on his record again. His last 3 fights have gone to the decision.
Absolutely. Absolutely they have. All right. So, other news, recent. Uriah Faber's going to retire.
That breaks my heart, but
What?
Yeah, Uriah Faber, probably the poster child of the WEC and of the lighter weight classes below 155 for years. The ultimate bridesmaid. 6 UFC title fights, never got a belt. 6.
I mean, the only belt he did have,
Was the
the
WEC
big
belt.
one that he had was the WEC 145 pounder.
And when he lost that, he never got another crack. He got another crack, but he never got another belt.
Yeah,
I mean, we're talking 6 UFC title fights to lose all of them. Heartbreaking.
it is.
He's not that old. He's got plenty left in the tank. I don't think he's ever going to be title challenger worthy again, but he's got tons left.
He even recognized that. I mean, he was saying in his last loss he has plenty in the tank, but at some point when you've been fighting as long as he's been fighting since he's 18, 19 years old, and he's got other things he wants to do. He's a businessman.
We debated this earlier today, sitting in my house, that Uriah Faber, in my opinion, while the significance of his career is huge, he's not that good. I don't think in a couple of years we'll consider him even a top 10 all-time at his weight class, despite the fact that everybody wants to see him that way because he was the guy for a long time when it didn't matter. And now he's still the guy everybody knows. He's the biggest star at that weight class until Conor McGregor. He's the biggest star at 145 or 135 until Conor McGregor. I still don't think he's that good. I think if you look at his resume in a few years, you're going to go, yeah, okay, he was a good guy, but he lost to every great fighter he fought. He was well above average. And like I said, his impact, I still think is huge. But I don't think anybody will look at the California kid and go, yep, one of the best featherweights ever, one of the best bantamweights ever. I think he'll be down in that list in a few years when you look back.
I may not think of him as the best, but I'm always going to picture him in my top 5 just because I've watched him for a long time. It's more sentimental, but the guy has always been there. He's been in all the fights he's ever fought in. I mean, you can't knock him for even fighting against Dominic Cruz 3 times, Renan Barão twice, Jose Aldo.
I give you those, but Jose Aldo, did he win?
He did not.
Renan Barão, did he win?
No.
Dominic Cruz, how many of those did he win?
He won the first one.
The first one when Dominic Cruz was 10 pounds heavier and like 22 years old and fresh on the game. That's it. He lost all of those.
France, I think what Ian's trying to say is,
Hello, you play to win the game.
Well,
and clearly he did not do that.
He always tried to win, but
He
Like,
was, but
he
I
did
think
not
the
do that.
sport. I think the sport moved past him.
yeah, I mean, it definitely did. But if you're gonna go by his career, you got to go for his younger years in the WEC and
When he lost to
that.
Mike Thomas Brown twice.
Before that,
Okay, when he beat Brian Bowles. That's pretty much that's what you're telling me. So, like I said, if you look at his record, not a single person that he beat would you go, yeah, that guy's even in the conversation for a top 10 list. But the guys he lost to are, and he was competitive with a lot of them, but he lost to all of them. That's my problem. I mean, you got to give him credit, but when he was really good, his game is predicated on what? A strong boxing game with some power. He's really good in the scramble, and he's got great guillotine chokes.
amazing guillotine.
That was enough to make you the top of the heap 10 years ago. This is not 10 years ago. This sport is so young that 22 years ago, you had guys walking in with a gi on and throwing crane kicks. You had another guy walking in as a pro wrestler and actually winning a fight, Mr. Ken Shamrock, or God forbid, Ludwig Borga from the WWF came in and fought in a UFC tournament. I mean, you had guys who knew one thing and were okay at it and they could compete.
And they were wearing wrestling shoes.
Oh, my God. And now, 10 years later, Uriah Faber hits the scene, and guys know everything. And they're good at it. And he is really good at a couple of things, and it's enough. Nowadays, 10 years later than that, you have to be solid everywhere. You have to have the tools to compete in every part of the game, and he doesn't. Not to mention, he's not getting any faster in his mid-30s. He lost all the speed that he would have needed to compete years and years ago. And maybe he's more technical than he was 5, 6, 7 years ago. But he lost the speed to take advantage of it. He never got to put everything together. He's never going to be that good in my mind.
So is it safe to say, at least, from what I'm hearing, is that he was always good enough to be there, but he was never good enough to be the guy?
Oh, no. In my mind, if you want to put it in football terms, if you want to look at it.
Is he Dan Marino?
Dan Marino, though, in my mind, is still going to be a guy that was Hall of Fame worthy. Uriah Faber, as far as his record goes, he's not Hall of Fame worthy.
Oh, you bet he is Hall of Fame worthy. Maybe.
Well, this is the problem.
I think
MMA does not have a Hall of Fame.
That is a problem.
There's a UFC Hall of Fame, and it's more based on your impact than it is on your record.
Well, of course, but most things are. I mean, if you had a vote, Ian, are you voting him in?
No.
France?
Heck yeah, I am.
Well, let me ask you this then. Michael Vick. He had one of the biggest, take the dogfighting thing out, whatever. Michael Vick, as far as a superstar went, was huge in the NFL. He was the most popular player for years. Correct?
For maybe 3 years.
Yeah, he was huge. His impact was massive. He was the first quarterback to come in and be able to start running the ball, and it changed the quarterback position.
Randall Cunningham. But I understand your point, yes.
Slowly changed the quarterback position into something else.
Sure.
We probably don't have Cam Newton without Michael Vick.
Okay.
Uriah Faber did the same thing, but is Michael Vick a Hall of Famer?
Yeah, I would probably bring the dogfighting thing into that. It has a little bit an issue because it hurts his rep a little bit. But, I mean, here's the difference.
Well, I'm saying if that didn't exist, based on his numbers, would he be a Hall of Famer? If he had that impact and those numbers, would you make Michael Vick a Hall of Famer?
Probably.
Based on just his numbers?
Here's the thing, though.
Ooh.
If you want to look just at numbers, but here's the thing. He had an impact for a very short amount of time. I feel like Uriah Faber's had an impact for quite a long time.
I think Uriah Faber gets too much credit for Team Alpha Male and the coaching aspect. As a fighter, he didn't have that great of an impact. He runs a camp that has got one former champion, but a lot of real top-level guys. They're known for bringing great prospects in. But he doesn't even coach the team. He just fronts the bill. He pays for the building and makes all the money. But he has to hire somebody else to coach. They didn't get a champion out of that camp, him included, in the UFC for years until he brought in another high-profile guy to coach the team.
So he's John Elway right now with the Denver Broncos.
Yeah, getting all the credit, but what did he do?
So that I could understand that being the comparison where, yes, John Elway was very good on the field. He's probably a top whatever you want to say quarterback. But now as a GM, he's brought Peyton Manning there. They won a Super Bowl. Now they're still a really good team.
Yeah.
And he's just the face.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, I'm trying to think of a quarterback that I could compare Uriah Faber to. And I really can't think of one because if you don't win a Super Bowl, it's hard to get in there without the numbers. It really is. I mean, I guess I would call him Scottie Pippen.
Oh, Scottie Pippen's got a lot of titles.
He's got a lot of titles.
Guy's got a lot of titles.
And
he's pretty good.
Faber had a lot of success.
He's pretty good, though.
But was Scottie Pippen Hall of Fame worthy? Just by his numbers?
I mean,
I'm not a basketball guy. I'm just throwing a name out there.
He was one of the best teams
I'm
of
like
all
so
time.
far from a basketball guy. I watched
cool.
one basketball game a year.
No, I understand the point you're trying to make, but
I lost you there.
That's okay.
Well, Uriah Faber did help keep the 145-pound and 135-pound division relevant before he even got into.
But let me ask you this: do you think the UFC purchased the WEC because of Uriah Faber? Because I've heard that. I've heard people say, "Oh, they bought the WEC because Uriah Faber was big and he could do pay-per-view numbers and draw fans, and that's why they bought it." No, they didn't. They bought it for the same reason they bought every other organization that got big, because they wanted them off TV and they didn't want the competition. WEC signed a TV deal with somebody, and the UFC said, "Yep, they're a target." And 6 months later, they got bought.
No, but I mean, for the lighter weight classes, he was the guy. So
he was always the guy for years. Yeah.
Yeah. So why wouldn't you put him into a Hall of Fame?
Because he wasn't that good.
Oh, man, I love this discussion, man. This is awesome. If any of the listeners out there, if you have anything to say on this, hit us up on Twitter on the Fifth Round Podcast. Let us know, because I feel like this is a great discussion. Because in my opinion, not knowing the technical stuff as much as you guys will, for the impact that he had on the UFC, I feel like he should be going in. Okay, so you get guys that go in not so much with how good they were, in this case in the octagon, but what he's done for the vast majority of the sport.
It's a weird discussion, too, because, as I said, there is no MMA Hall of Fame that's separate. Sure. I mean, the Baseball Hall of Fame is not run by the MLB. It's separate. Well, the MMA Hall of Fame does not exist. Just the UFC Hall of Fame. And that gets really complicated.
Sure.
Because they put guys in there that if you look at their record, there is no way. There's just no way. Forrest Griffin and Stephen Bonner are Hall of Famers, Brian.
Well, that's because of the Ultimate Fighter.
Because they had one fight, so that fight should have made. They have a fight wing specifically to put fights into the Hall of Fame. So you should put that fight in the Hall of Fame. But those two, come on. Forrest Griffin's a former champion, but it was a lot more about who he fought, not about how good he was. If you want to talk about how good he was never that good. He was one of my favorite fighters. I loved watching him. He's exciting as all get out. He's a fun guy to watch, but he was not a top guy. He just wasn't.
No,
which was proven when he lost his belt in his first defense, and it wasn't even close.
And didn't really win too much after that.
No.
So, you see, France, though, he's making his point for us. Now Uriah Faber should definitely go in that case.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're judging it by those criteria, I guess.
That he's already in the door.
So,
it's over.
All right, so same topic. How do you feel about Dan Henderson's career? Does Dan Henderson make your Hall of Fame?
That one's a rough one.
Well, Dan Henderson's the only guy at this point, other than David Branch, and I don't count the World Series of Fighting on the same level as the UFC, or Pride was, the only guy in a top-tier, top-shelf organization to hold two belts at the same time, two different weight classes. I mean, that says something, but it's his whole career, and now you got the shroud of TRT hanging over it. Do you put Dan Henderson in the Hall of Fame?
MMA or UFC?
Take your pick.
I don't know if he deserves to be in the UFC. In MMA, yes.
God.
Because
this is tough.
he made most of his name outside of the UFC.
Absolutely, but where he made his name, the UFC owns the rights to all those fights. And Bas Rutten is put in the UFC Hall of Fame. He had two UFC fights.
I guess he would have to be a UFC Hall of Famer.
I mean, if you want to Bas Rutten fought twice in the UFC. And we're talking Bas Rutten, for anybody who doesn't know, my favorite of all time. And he had his last UFC fight, I think, at UFC, 22. And we're talking the turn of the millennium was the last time Bas Rutten fought, and then worked for their competitors, and still does work for their competitors as a broadcaster. And they put him in because any fan who wanted to look at that Hall of Fame was going to call it crap and a complete sham until Bas Rutten touched it in some way, shape, or form. 2 fights, he won a heavyweight title. Yeah, but he won a heavyweight title against Kevin Randleman.
Well,
and that's how far back.
Isn't that what you're doing right now, though? Aren't you kind of calling it a sham?
Yeah, it still is. It's more respectable now because at least they put Bas Rutten
because
in
they put your favorite guy in.
No, they put. If you watched Bas Rutten, he fought predominantly in Pancrase, and we're talking ancient history at this point. Pancrase, Pancrase is one of 2 MMA organizations in the world that is older than the UFC. The UFC debuted first UFC ever. Pancrase beat it by 2 weeks.
Well, in case any of the listeners don't know, Ian has every UFC DVD back to when
MMA.
DVDs started. MMA, I'm sorry, not even just the UFC.
Oh, yeah,
all of MMA, all the way back to when they started making DVDs.
Oh, yeah.
You know, you might actually sell them on VHS, too. I'm not really sure.
I do have a few VHS.
Of course you do.
Even has some from that you had to get a converter.
Do you listen to podcasts on 8-Track, too?
Yeah, thanks, buddy. Thanks. No, I had to go purchase a DVD player that was region free because I bought stuff that I desperately wanted that would not play on a U.S. produced DVD player. So I have 2 DVD players, not even Blu-ray, DVD players in my house because they'll play stuff that's region free. It's anything that's coded for a different region. I have like Brazilian DVDs that I don't even have English audio on them.
I'm sure your fiance loves that.
She absolutely hates it. But I mean, they used to fight Pancrase. It was totally different rules. Think of pro wrestling rules.
Okay.
And you'd have it. I think if they started that back up today, it would be huge. People would love it. You had a ring, not an octagon, but an actual wrestling ring. You had rope breaks for submissions. So if you started a submission, a guy grabbed the ropes, rope break. You lose a point, but you get a rope break. You only get a certain number of them per fight, but you get them. They had 8 counts. You knocked a guy down. You had like standing 8 counts and everything. And no closed fist strikes. It was all open palm. Every strike with your hands had to be an open palm. So Bas Rutten learned
sounds like WWE right now.
Bas Rutten had learned how to curl.
Except not fake.
He learned how to curl his hands back to present the real base of the palm, and he could throw stuff so hard. He broke noses and jaws with open palms. And you wore boots and shin guards. So it was legit wrestling rules.
So like legit wrestling like Ric Flair?
Woo! Yeah. Absolutely. If you took WWF fighters and put them in a ring and said, actually fight, that's what it would look like as Pancrase.
You know what Ian Ric Flair has to say?
To be the man, you gotta beat the man.
And that's the way it goes.
And Bas Rutten was the man.
Oh, he absolutely was. I mean, by the time he made it to the UFC, he was wrecked. He had no cartilage left in either knee. He had back problems. He had everything going wrong with him. And he fought at heavyweight, weighing 201. 201, because heavyweight back then was over 200 pounds. It was a totally different weight class. Yeah. We're talking pre-weight class. That's how far back this is.
I think the stuff I ate before we started taping might put me in that. Then that's terrible.
Yeah, I mean,
I lose.
We're talking the UFC wasn't even owned by Dana White and Zuffa. This is way, way, way back. We're talking ancient history. But that's when Dan Henderson debuted, to get back to Dan Henderson.
I was wondering when we were going to get back to Dan Henderson.
Full circle there. That's how you go full circle in radio there, people.
His career spans back that long. What do you think? I mean, he won a four-man tournament. His first 2 UFC fights. He fought in a 4-man tournament, won it. Had a ton of success, went to Pride, won a couple of belts, came back to the UFC, lost title fights, but went to Strikeforce, beat Fedor.
Yeah, had the light heavyweight championship in Strikeforce.
But he never got that UFC belt.
It's hard because he definitely made a lot of his name outside the UFC. I mean, so did Uriah Faber, but he still had a huge name.
Well, if you look at, I mean, most media outlets, almost as a general consensus, consider all their stats UFC, WEC, Strikeforce stats. They combine the 3. So they just don't combine Pride stats. That's hard because the round format was different. The rules were different. But so you can consider, I think, his Strikeforce career, his UFC career. Okay. Same thing.
Then I guess I'd consider Dan Henderson a Hall of Famer. I mean, he had an impact.
Yeah, I think he's basically, if it comes down to it, I think he's going to fall into the same category as Bonds, Clemens, McGuire. It's either going to be in or out based on the steroids. He's going to be sitting in a Mike Piazza situation where they're going to go, well, yeah, the numbers are there, but do you put him in because he cheated? Now, he didn't technically cheat. It was all legal when he did it, but most of his career, the last decade, was all boosted by testosterone use.
Yeah, but...
Well, I mean, not to, going off the baseball reference, obviously, but in that case, then you got to look back to all of the people that did it before all of this was regulated.
Oh yeah, but he's one of the few guys who legitimately we know used it when it wasn't. I mean, guys were using anabolics and stuff and getting caught.
Did he admit to it?
No, there's documented paperwork. Yeah, at the time he was absolutely.
See, I think that's different though. You know what I mean? So, like, when you look back at the 70s and 80s to think if guys were cheating or not, obviously, in baseball, it's much different when there's something on paper that says, yep, this guy did this. So, I mean, I don't know how they're going to go about it with UFC and the way they want to go about it, but obviously baseball's a different animal. They don't want to deal with that at all.
No, I mean, and that's a real traditional sport, whereas, thank God, the UFC is really young, so there's not a lot of tradition. There's not a lot of just... Oh, this is the way it's always been. So it's got to stay that way, holding it back. But
well, they do have Ken Shamrock in there.
But Ken Shamrock went in way back. Ken Shamrock was the first inductee into the Hall of Fame, along with Hoist Gracie in 2003 or 4.
And both of them
were
caught
before that. Out, but they got caught after.
True.
Both of them were caught post to their induction. I think their induction was actually like 2001. It was like UFC 34, 35, somewhere in that area. I mean, Ken Shamrock went in before he became Ken Shamrock. The Ken Shamrock that went in there was in the WWF at the time and had a very solid MMA record. Yeah, you can take that guy's career and cut it in 2 pieces, pre-WWF and post-WWF. Pre-WWF, legitimate Hall of Famer, great fighter, great record. Post-WWF, sham. That's it. I mean...
we can stop that.
That's it. That's it.
Woo!
So I think Henderson probably should be. Probably.
So
but did he hang on too long and tarnish his record?
Now obviously Uriah Faber's in.
No, God.
Yeah, after all this 25-minute plus talk, now you've made all these points because Uriah Faber is now going in.
All right, Uriah Faber.
Boom.
Whoa.
Woo!
1045theteam.com is the Fifth Round podcast with your host Ian Foard, Brian France, and of course your producer extraordinaire, Brian the Closer Mariano. Ian had to take you on a ride there with Uriah Faber, so I'm glad we all agreed upon that because, you know, you were kind of hesitant before, but now we all agree upon that. I appreciate that. Silence. It's okay. Yeah. Ian, what's our next topic, buddy?
All right, so just to get it out of the way real quick, news on the front of Brock Lesnar and John Jones with their steroid tests or accusations and their hearings with the Nevada State Athletic Commission. John Jones's camp is claiming that a supplement he took caused this positive test. Substances that were banned were in it and not listed on the label. He's supposed to have an answer, or the athletic commission is supposed to have an answer for him and us as to what's going on with his suspension within the next 7 days. And Brock Lesnar has had his hearing delayed until December by his request because he's having a foot cream tested that he thinks might have caused his positive test.
What the
Yes, a foot cream.
Foot
even
creams?
even better, he originally claimed it was from some eye drops. He had the eye drops tested, negative. So now he's having a foot cream tested for an estrogen blocker, because most foot creams have estrogen blockers in them.
Come on, man.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. Yep. So that's right up there with tainted kangaroo meat.
Yeah. Oh, my God. Tainted kangaroo.
Now,
my Lord.
On to our last topic for the day. Ronda Rousey went on to the Ellen show this week.
God, I love her.
And said that this will be one of her last fights, followed by Dana White saying that she is winding down on her MMA career. So Amanda Nunes, Ronda Rousey for the title, coming up
at UFC 207.
And that might be one of the last times we see her, according to her. Real vague on everything. Nobody's really saying how long she plans on sticking around for.
Well, I mean, before her last loss against Holly Holm, she was considering right after she turned 30 to only have a few more fights. So coming back, I mean, obviously she's still thinking the same thing. So, I mean, I think she's saying 31, 32. She's 30 right now. So she's got 2 years left in her.
I just kind of question the point of coming back if it's only for a little bit. I would have thought that a devastating knockout like she suffered against Holly Holm would either completely end the drive to compete, to where she got hurt for the first time ever and she would have just said, that's it, I'm out of here. Or it would have done the exact opposite and it would have pushed her to come back hard and train like a maniac and really make a run. And if she's coming back and she's already talking about retirement before she ever even comes back, how driven is she going to be? What kind of Ronda Rousey are we going to see if she doesn't even have her first fight back yet and she's already saying, well, yeah, I think I'm going to retire soon. Well, your mind is someplace other than fighting, isn't it? Because this is a game where you got to be 100% in.
Yeah.
You got to be concentrating on the cage. And she's talking about doing movies and, oh, well, I might only fight 1 or 2 more times.
Yeah, I mean, she has done a couple of movies. They've been pretty big blockbusters with Fast and Furious 7, few other things. So she can get into that acting, but she definitely needs to build that name back up. I think her star power dropped a little bit after that Holly Holm fight and the year off.
Yeah, it blows my mind because it looks to me like her star power is directly tied to her dominance in the cage. She stops fighting and stops winning. Nobody cares.
See, I agree with that to a point, but maybe she just wants to come back to get that one last time, and then she can leave. Maybe her mindset is, okay, you're right. My star power has dropped a little bit after that last fight with Holly Holm. But if I come back and I'm the champ, I can say, peace, blouses, okay, I'm going to go do a bunch of movies and, make billions of dollars, and I don't need this anymore.
This is true, but I mean, as a fan, anybody who's a
it's
Rousey
awful.
fan, if she leaves without rematching Holly Holm, if she leaves without fighting Cyborg, and if she leaves without getting that belt back, there could be a lot of people with a real sour taste in their mouth who are real disappointed, wanting more. And she's got multiple fights lined up that almost need to happen, and she's already talking about walking away.
But do they? Does she really owe us anything?
She doesn't owe anything to us. I mean, what these guys go through, these guys and girls to get in a cage and fight, they don't owe us anything. But to leave that question hanging there, I can't imagine. I'm just questioning how much competitive drive she has left, because anybody should want to come back and beat the girl who just knocked them cold and broke their jaw. Mm-hmm. Holly Holm wrecked her. She should want some form of payback. Now, right now, it doesn't make sense. Holly Holm's lost 2 in a row and not looked good. She is, as I predicted a year ago, Brian, looking like nobody's going to know this reference or get it whatsoever, but she's looking like the female version of Maurice Smith. Maurice Smith won a title, beat Mark Coleman, who was dominating the way Rousey was dominating in men's MMA, won a title by beating him, and then fell off the map and was remembered and will always be remembered just for that upset. That's going to be Holly Holm. I mean, she's not that good. So that fight doesn't make sense right now, but that's got to happen eventually. She's got to turn around and beat the girl who beat her. An unavenged loss, your only loss, will leave just a stain that no fan wants to see on that record.
So, could you see that happening in 2 fights, though?
If she loses, maybe. If she wins, I don't know if it'll ever make sense for the UFC, which is unfortunate. But that's one that she should attempt to fight before she leaves. With the amount I've heard about Ronda Rousey, Cyborg Santos, if that fight doesn't happen, that fight's been talked about for how long?
Yeah, even Ronda has come out and said she was thinking about wanting to fight Cyborg.
Absolutely. So, if you go on to SureDog.com, my favorite MMA website right now, and you look, she's been back in, hasn't even fought her first fight, and there are 3 articles on the main page, Ronda Rousey, Cyborg Santos. 3 articles out of 10 on the main page are about Rousey and Cyborg, and Rousey hasn't even freaking fought yet. That's ridiculous. That fight's got to happen. I've read those articles for so long now. If that fight doesn't happen, I'm going to lose it.
Yeah, ever since Rousey came onto the scene, that's been the talk. Cyborg versus Ronda.
Yeah, if they weren't talking about her fighting Floyd, they've been talking about her fighting Cyborg. I mean, TMZ has been reporting on it. That's how crazy it is. That fight's got to happen. But to come in already, she's got a title fight coming up. And her big return from getting demolished, knocked unconscious and sent to La La Land right in the middle of a cage in front of over 1 million people. And she's talking about finishing her career. Focus on the fight in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I do agree with you in that aspect. A lot of the fighters should have that mindset that I'm focused on, this fight coming up, and I'm ready to, come back and make my career a big deal. But can we blame her, since she's getting a little older, to start looking ahead? Maybe her mindset isn't completely like, all right, I'm done. I really don't care whether I win or lose. Maybe her mindset is, I still want to go in there and I still want to be the best. But I know within the next 2 to 3 years, this is where my life is going to take me, not just in the octagon.
Well, a lot of the criticism of her at the Holm fight was that she was too distracted.
Yeah.
Too much going on. Mind in another place, dealing with too much that wasn't fighting. And she learned nothing whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, she's
doing the same thing. It drives me nuts. And Amanda Nunes is not the girl to overlook. If Holly Holm's devastating, she's not that powerful of a striker. She's got kicks that will knock you out if she hits you, but everything else she throws is just a pitter-patter punch to get points, to score, and to win. She was never a power striker. Amanda Nunes is a wild woman. She hits things and they break. I mean, what she did to Miesha Tate's face needed surgery, and that's what Ronda Rousey's going to go fight. And she's going, oh, yeah, but, I got other things going on. No, you shouldn't even leave the gym. Why are you even talking to Ellen about anything but the fight you have coming up?
Because Ellen doesn't care.
I'll give you that.
Ellen's a weird I know you watch Ellen every day, Ian. I know this because you're on Midnights now. I know.
Yeah, it's the second time I ever watched Ellen, and the first time was a Ronda Rousey interview.
Now you're lying. We all know you're lying. It's okay.
Yeah, it's my favorite show.
There it is.
In fact, I style
Took
my
me
hair.
an hour and 15 minutes, but you gave it to me.
I style my hair like Ellen on purpose.
Listen.
I really don't.
Oh, I mean, I style my hair. No, wait, I don't. So it's okay.
What hair?
Either way. Yeah, everyone's a ball buster, I'll tell you. All right.
Well, obviously, we will be talking about the UFC 207 as when we get closer to the fight with Ronda Rousey and Amanda Nunes. So stay tuned for that coming up in a few podcasts.
And next episode should be a large breakdown of UFC 205.
It's going to be huge. All UFC 205 next week. It's
that's
be
all it's going to be next week.
I tried not to touch on it too much this time because that's all we're going to talk about.
We're going to leave them for next week.
Yeah.
Leave them for next week. Make sure you guys check us out next week. Guys, another great episode. As always, make sure you check us out next week. We'll break down UFC 205 for you, all the storylines. We'll even give you selections for it. They will be ready and raring to go. Guys, I'm having fun with this, man. I know I'm not crazy into the UFC. You guys are going to turn me into a bad apple. I also hate you guys for that. But
bad
my buddy,
apple.
Yeah, listen. I was trying to be, nice, but my buddy Ric Flair is going to tell you.
Woo!
That's it. Okay. All right, guys. I appreciate it. We'll get you next week. Get ready for UFC 205. Everyone out there, hit us up on Twitter at the Fifth Round Podcast, and you can tell Ian that he needs to style his hair differently or keep watching Ellen.
And make
Either
sure
way.
you catch Bellator and the UFC Friday, Saturday night. They're both live on television.
You get one. One's on FS1.
Saturday night, Fox Sports 1. Prelims should start at 7 o'clock. And Friday night, I'm not 100% sure of the time. Spike
think usually
TV
Spike
for
TV,
Bellator.
right?
Yeah, Spike TV, Bellator. Usually, I think around 9 or 10 o'clock at night.
And the streams are online for both the early prelims are on the UFC Fight Pass and on SpikeTV.com.
Excellent. All right, for Ian Foard and Brian France, I'm your producer extraordinaire, Brian the closer, Mariano. Make sure you check us out online. We'll have these episodes up every Friday afternoon. Got you guys covered with all MMA. Thank you guys for listening. Of course, we'll see you guys in the Octagon.